Hello, welcome to Conversations for the Moving Self. I am your host, Megan, a lifelong movement artist and facilitator. Each week, I invite you inside of the honest conversations that I have been having with some incredibly inspiring movement and well-being practitioners, as we unpack the beautiful roller coaster it is to pursue a lifestyle built around movement and well-being. Join us as we share and reflect on the moments where movement lights your soul on fire, to the situations where you begin to question everything. Welcome to Conversations for the Moving Self. Today I have Emily Bufford here, and I'm so excited to have Emily here. We had the chance to meet over Christmas break this year in New York. I was able to step into Emily's classes for a few days, and even the brief time I got in the studio with her, I had just such a pleasure being in her space and felt extremely held and cared for and pushed to continue to expand my limits and to grow and research and be curious. And felt immediately like, okay, someday Emily needs to be on the podcast just to talk about all things dance, talk about all things movement, and how to make this a sustainable path and as long of your life as you'd like it to be. So thank you so much, Emily, for joining. Emily is joining us from New York today. She's a dancer, teacher, producer, and choreographer currently based in New York. Emily is also the producer of the Young Choreographers Festival, an annual New York event presenting up-and-coming choreographers, as well as an educator at Broadway Dance Center, Steps on Broadway, and teaching across the United States and internationally. I'm super excited to have you here. And so, yeah, let's jump right into the conversation.
Hey, I'm so excited to be here. Let's do it.
It's Monday while we're recording, so I'd just like to start by asking you the same question that we start all the episodes with, of just how you're showing up for you, your movement, and well-being practice today so far.
It is Monday. It is daylight savings time Monday. How I showed up for myself today. I first thing in the morning when I get out of bed, I do a roll down is my very first thing that I do to show up for myself because my 37-year-old body versus my like 22-year-old body does like to get a little bit of just a spinal release and a hamstring stretch and a just gentle introduction to the day. And then I had the good fortune of having a private with a lovely young dancer this morning who I got there a little bit early and the studio was empty, and I had the privilege of just having a little bit of studio time to myself, which I'm not always afforded. And so I did some tendus and some dégagés as I always do just to get my feet warm. It's a beautiful day here actually in New York, finally, after what felt like the
Long.
never-ending saga of snow and winter. But it's beautiful today, but a little chilly still, and so the studio floor was a little cold, so I did some footwork and then I just took some time to twirl for myself before my lovely young dancer arrived, and it was a really wonderful and appreciated way to get into my body to start the week on a Monday.
Yeah. Mm. And when it's like a little gift from the universe, and you're like, oh, okay, this is really nice.
It was
Just
really nice. It was totally unexpected, truly just a little gift from the universe. The studio spaces in New York are very rarely open early. They go back to back to back to back all day long. And I just happened to, I guess, luck out in the sense that there was a little window between whatever was in the studio before my private. Um, and I made sure there was nobody in before I, went into the space because I never want to be disrespectful to somebody's class or rehearsal or whatever was going on. But I was like, oh, there's nobody here. And I took that initiative and I went in, and it was really lovely to be able to start my morning that way and to also give myself a moment to kind of find my life before starting my private.
is a big thing, I think, of finding yourself before teaching. Super, for me, super helpful, but also like can be hard to cultivate at certain points but is a really important part of being able to show up for yourself in order to show up for the people you're guiding.
Absolutely.
Mm.
Absolutely.
As we head into the conversation, I would love if you could just share a little bit around your entry into movement, dance. It doesn't have to be dance specific, uh, how you've arrived here.
Absolutely. I mean, I this is beyond what I remember, but I started dancing at 2.5. And because I was so young, I don't remember this, but my mother still remembers this. I apparently was begging her to find me a dancing school. Mommy, please find me a dancing school. So somewhere in my spirit, I guess I just always knew. But she found a studio. I grew up in South Florida, and she found a dance studio where one of my friends' older sisters attended, and they were happy there. And my mother called and I guess said, my 2.5-year-old is asking me to find her a dancing school. And the woman who was the studio owner was this lovely woman, Miss Cindy, who was my first teacher. And she was like, well, is she potty trained? And I was. And that's a valid question, fair, absolutely, if you have toddlers coming into your space. Um, well, we don't usually start them until they're 3, but she can come and she can try and see how she does. And as long as she's potty trained, like, bring her in. And I went, and apparently I loved it so much that I asked my mom if I could go a second day per week, which
That
honestly is
makes
so
sense.
on brand for me because, like, when I'm committed, I'm committed. But she asked, and Miss Cindy was like, well, we have another 3-year-old class, but it's technically a 3-4 class. She's not only going to be the youngest one in the room again, but she's going to be like massively the youngest one in the room. But my mom brought me and I loved it yet again. And so from the time I was 2, and granted, my birthday is at the end of October, so I was 3 pretty quickly into the year, but I was taking twice a week, and minus a very short blip of not wanting to take tap class for a few weeks, I've never looked back. And so now at 37 and almost a half, I've been half birthdays matter.
Yeah.
Very happy half birthday to you from Alice in Wonderland. Um, I've been dancing for the better portion of 35 years. And my journey was, I started at that studio and it was, I hate the word recreational because I think recreational is a derogatory term in a sense. It's just a dance studio, and dancers who were on pre-professional tracks are on pre-professional tracks. So I was taking classes as one does. And then at the age of 8, I auditioned for the competition team. And I made the competition team, the Star Dancers, at the studio I was growing up at. And loved that. And I competed in tap and jazz and lyrical, musical theater. They made us compete ballet. I love
So
ballet, so I want to put a very huge disclaimer out since this will be going out to the social media realm. I love ballet. I did not love competing ballet at that point in my life as someone who was not a ballerina. Um, but I appreciate the experience. But competing was wonderful, and I learned so much from that. Like, I learned how to be as an only child, I learned how to really be a team player. I learned responsibility for myself and for the team. I learned that sentiment of there is no I in team, but there is a me in team, and me having to show up respectfully and responsibly and ethically and with integrity for myself and everybody around me. Um, and I then, actually, a hurricane brought me to New York for the first time. Hurricane Wilma, which maybe you remember growing up in North Carolina. Hurricane Wilma, I grew up in South Florida, and Hurricane Wilma was only supposed to be a category 1 when it made landfall, and I grew up on the Barrier Island in South Florida, right outside Boca Raton area.
yeah.
And so we closed, the storm shutters, and we stayed put. And I grew up in an apartment, we stayed put. And when Hurricane Wilma actually did make landfall, it made landfall as a category 4 hurricane. And so we got stuck in our apartment for about 5 days with no power or water. The bridge gets locked in the upright position.
Yeah.
So when they brought the bridge down, We climbed down the stairs in the dark. I remember me, my mother, my father, excuse me, and my grandmother. We got in the car, we drove to Orlando. I remember we stayed in a Disney hotel for the night, and then we flew to New York the very next day. And we were stuck in the Crown Plaza Times Square Hotel for 2 weeks until the power and the water was brought back. And throughout that 2 weeks, I took class like all day, every day at Steps and Broadway Dance Center. And I was like 14 when this happened and just fell madly, madly in love with New York City dance. And I built some relationships there. And so then my mother was allowing me to kind of, she would fly up with me, I would take class. And then when I was old enough, one of my dear mentors, a wonderful, incredibly talented and smart woman by the name of Ginger Cox, recommended that I submit to be an intern for the summer at BDC. And I was too young to be one. You were supposed to be 18, and I was only going to be 17 at that point. It was going to be after my junior year of high school. And I submitted. Thankfully, she very much had my back and, wrote the reference letter, and I got accepted. And my mother, who was wonderfully supportive and always has been, worked remotely from the New York office from the company she was working at so that I could come spend the summer here in New York. We sublet an apartment, and I lived my entire life in dance studios that summer, much at Broadway Dance Center. I used to take tap with Lynn Schwab, who is a wonderful tap teacher at Steps on Broadway, and I just danced all day, every day. And I knew after that summer I'd been on the fence about what I wanted to do for my college education and where I wanted to go and where I wanted to be. And it made the decision hard, but in a way very easy, because I was like, well, I'm moving to New York City. There's no real room for negotiation. Like, the only negotiation there was I was going to audition for SUNY Purchase, because if I was going to go to school to be a dancer, that was really the only program I was interested in at the time. Some of the programs that now exist did not exist at the time, and so that's off the table because it wasn't in existence.
Yeah.
I auditioned for SUNY Purchase, made it all the way through the audition, got asked to do my solo, and then I have never been in a ballet body. I firmly believe everybody's body is a dancer body if you would like to dance and you have a body, which, God willing, you have one, then you are living in a dancer body. But it was 2006 when I was looking for schools, and the modern teacher from that audition, a lovely, lovely gentleman, came up to me after I danced my solo and was so kind. Like, I have no regret or even like upset that I did not get into SUNY Purchase, but he came over to me and he was like, Emily, we loved you and we wanted to see you dance your solo, but we know you're not getting accepted because even for the modern major, they're looking for ballet bodies. But again, this was literally 2 decades ago. Now it's a much more open, acceptance of varying body types and structures and heights and builds and all of the things, which is respectfully what it always should have been. But I'm glad we're there in a much better way now. But so that was the deciding vote, because I was like, well, if I'm not getting in at SUNY Purchase, then I'm moving immediately to New York City. And so I did. I moved to New York at 18. My parents helped put me in an apartment because I went to City University, New York, Baruch College, which was a terrible choice. And I'm open about that. I'm back in school now to finish my degree. It was not the right school for me, and that's okay. It's the right school for some people, but it wasn't mine. But they don't have dorms. So I was in an apartment, and I was work studying at Broadway Dance Center, and I was doing all my training. And in the meantime, I was building these wonderful relationships with people who are some of my closest and dearest mentors now. And I started assisting. And very quickly into my living in New York, I hurt my knee and also realized that I didn't love performing, like, at
Mm.
all. I get anxiety from being on stage, and I was watching my friends who love performing, and they were elated when they were on stage. It brought them such a sense of joy and excitement and adrenaline in a good way. And for me, it brought me adrenaline in a stressful way. And I recognized that that was not for me. And so I had started to realize that I loved choreography and that I loved dance education. I'd been assisting these teachers, and I was like, I literally love this. Like, I love being in the classroom. I love seeing progress happening in real time. I love the satisfaction of knowing that you were able to help someone get closer to the thing that they dream about doing or having. And so I
Mhm.
very quickly was like, oh, that feeling my friends get from performing, I get that in this space.
Mhm.
We're done over here.
Yeah.
We are so majorly done over here because I was a good performer. I wouldn't say I was an excellent performer. There are people who are exceptional performers, but I was good enough to work. And I was like, I'm taking myself out of this lane because I don't want to be there. And I'm putting
Yeah.
myself in this lane where I do desperately want to be. And I'm going to focus in on getting as good at being an educator as I possibly can be because this is the lane I want to be in. And these of my mentors are who I don't want to be like anyone other than myself, but if you had asked the 20-year-old version of me, I would have been like, I want to be just like this person, or I want to be just like this person. But those people are people that I still love and respect and look up to. I just, in my 37th year, know that the person I'm best suited to being is myself, and also that they already exist. So I should be offering what I offer in my own way and not a
Yeah.
watered down version of theirs. However, it was very clear to me that the lane I was meant to be in was the dance education lane because I was
Mhm.
elated by it. I still get excited about it. I love working with dancers. I love young dancers and old dancers and everyone in between those two spectrums. And I know that sounds like a wide spectrum, but it is because I work with 8-year-olds and I work with a 73-year-old. And I think the fact that I get to have that wide of an age range in my space on any given week is incredibly inspiring. And also the level disparity of it. I teach adults who have no experience all the way through. I see professional working dancers or, pre-professional teen dancers. And I love that I'm able to be in the room with every single kind of level on that spectrum because they're all dancers.
Exactly. Well, and like I feel it offers perspective to people in the space as well. I felt this a lot when I had a very similar trajectory as a kid growing up and had fallen in love with dance very quickly, and it became a very long story that has not ended, and won't end for as
Probably
long as I
won't end
can.
until you
Yeah,
literally cannot do it anymore. Like,
exactly. And due to a hip injury in high school, like was needed to take a step back in the capacity, but was like, I refuse to say goodbye, so I'll just be a dance business intern for a year at the studio. And then once I was making my way back into classes, I was taking classes with anybody who was doing the things I needed to be working on. And I was very grateful for the studio that I grew up at was so supportive of that part of me always, but like so accommodating in that part of my life and was like, yeah, whatever you need to be able to get back into class in the way that you want to be in class. And so I was taking like the little kids classes even though I was 17 and I was taking the beginner classes or whatever. And I think it was the first time I had had the chance to just be in class and see it as like every part of this is valuable and potentially strip back ego that I had formed in my childhood of like, okay, now I know what I'm doing, quote unquote, and be like, whoa, okay, wait, maybe I don't know what I'm doing and maybe I should reset. And every person in this room, no matter their level or their age, we can all offer each other something.
absolutely.
And I'm so grateful for that lesson at that time of my life because I think, yeah, now when I'm in any space, it's even more apparent to me. I'm just like, oh wow, I love this so much. Like, please, everybody, teach me everything.
Teach me everything. What do you have to share with me? Please, like,
Right.
give me all of the information. I'm very big on whys. Like, tell me why you're asking me to do it that way. Fill me in, like, not to spill the tea, but like, spill the tea. Like, what is the backbone of this? And like, talk to me about why the exercise is structured this way. Um, I love, I love understanding myself not myself as like me as a person, but like I love understanding the why of something myself. So when somebody offers to me, I can really be like, yes,
Yeah.
I get where that's coming from, and I understand why you're doing the exercise in the way that you are, and what the hope of it is, and where it could be beneficial, and all of those things. And I also love being able to share the why. Like I know that I'm not for everybody, but the people that I'm for, I'm very for, and the people that I'm not for, I'm probably like very not for. And I'm okay with that at this point in my life. Like there would have been a version of me that's like, why don't like my class? And I'm like, now I'm like, if you don't like my class, that's okay. Just find someone whose class you do like. But I
Mhm.
offer the why because as a dancer, I like knowing the why. Doing this exercise because, and it conjoins with this exercise so that when we get to this movement here, this plus this equals this happening successfully, or this happening with freedom, or this happening. So you don't even have to think about it at all because you've already done the work over here. And like, I offer that without having to be prodded for it because dancers have a tendency to not like asking questions. I wish we would change that in classroom approach of like never stifling a young dancer's curiosity urge even if you think the question is unnecessary. Like they obviously had a reason for asking it, and it's not for me to predetermine whether the question is valid. It's for me to offer the opportunity to have it answered. And then
Mhm.
once they ask the question, if I'm like, asking me what I had for lunch is not relevant to what we're doing right now, I can be like, let's talk about my lunch after class.
Yeah,
But if they're
exactly.
asking, you know, what color is the energy of this movement, which sometimes comes out of the mouths of the youngest dancers, not the oldest ones, that's not a silly question.
No.
What color is the energy of this movement? Like, and what is the intent of it? Because if I'm doing choreography that day that is more upbeat, the energy of something or the color of the energy might be orange or yellow. And if I'm doing the exact same movement on a day where the movement is different, it might be blue or red. And I don't know. I just think, sometimes giving the why immediately opens the door for them to see that there's safety in having that curiosity. And I think
Mm,
curiosity does sometimes kill the cat, but curiosity also sometimes gives you information that you needed and you didn't even realize you needed it.
definitely. And makes me think of also how gives the dancers autonomy a little bit more potentially in in their journey and actually like somehow by offering the why it allows them to feel like okay, I can I can get more inside this
Yes.
person's brain and I can work more from the place that I have. I'm not just trying to catch up with the train that we're on, like, but I'm on the train and I'm allowed to be part of the train.
Right. It would be like getting on a train and only knowing, this is a very New York like analogy, but it's like getting on the train and not knowing which train you're supposed to be on, but just being like, but I know I'm supposed to get to 96th Street.
Yeah, but I
And
don't
I'm
know
like,
how.
okay, well, on the west side, on the east side, in the city, somewhere out of the city, like there's a
Yeah,
lot of holes in that haven't been filled
yeah,
or information gaps. And even then, like I'm saying east and west side, but then I'm like, well, 96th Street and where on the west side? Because
yeah.
there's the C train, which stops at 96th and Central Park West, or there's the 123 train that stops at 96th and Broadway, or there's the bus that stops at 96th and Amsterdam or Columbia. Forgive me, I'm not well versed on the buses as
Don't
much as I
worry.
probably should be. I walk everywhere these days, so like I don't remember where the stops are. But the point of this is that those information gaps exist, and sometimes it's helpful for them to exist because it allows a dancer to really interject themselves into it. But
Yeah,
sometimes they're not helpful. Sometimes they're
yeah,
just holes that need filling so that a dancer can fill in the rest themselves.
yeah.
And yeah, yeah. I
Mhm.
think that is also more of a, I don't know, some of my mentors are very willing to answer questions and some of them aren't. I don't know that that's a generational thing, but I definitely think there used to be a more of a sentiment of like, well, because I said so.
Yeah,
Whereas
I think.
now, like, I offer that why freely, but if a dancer then has a follow-up question, like, it's not just because I said so, it's, well, let's dissect it. Let's
Yeah.
discuss it. Let's have a like, let's have an educated dialogue about it. And so, yeah, like, I just think classroom spaces should, not should, but have the opportunity to be that way. And I think some
Mm.
of my best learning has happened in spaces where I was allowed, and not only allowed, but encouraged for my brain to be like fully clicked on.
Mm. And what it employs the dancers then to then discover if they're able to be like fully clicked on. I had a teaching moment today where we're in a choreographic process and we're working on a partnering thing and that moment where like I could tell none of the kids were quite they're quite new to partnering in the group that I was working with today and I was like, okay, if I ask to demonstrate with it, they're gonna be having the whole internal dialogue of like, am I good enough? No, no, no. So I was like, let me use this random stool and explaining to them the stool is not a human being. So there's not, it's not the perfect example, but I'll show you, guide you, whatever. Now try it with your partner, like have dialogue about it. One of the groups was like, we can't figure out how to do that, but we can figure out how to do this. And I was like, actually, like, yeah, let's use that. And kind of then opened up the conversation to the other three pairs of like, see what else you can find. And they were like, wait, we actually get to use it. And I was like, yeah, like it's actually I like it way better than what I had. And it's nice for it to be something that feels nice for you guys too, instead of like feeling always a bit awkward about it and or trying to be something else. Like you two are your own bodies and you have to find something that's nice, but also as an audience member, we can feel that. And it was just like, oh wow, like this this felt like a nice moment for me as well as a teacher to feel like I could sense we all felt a little bit calmer in that moment. And that's my hope as a teacher that we can keep coming back to employing dancers to have that space
Well, and
to
it
feel
also,
good and to explore.
it's a testament also to that they feel safe to explore, which I think is a very important thing in classroom spaces from anyone, anywhere, because they were given opportunity, you allowed them to kind of play with it. And I know the word play sometimes in dance gets like a very like, oh, it's play, but like it is play.
Yeah.
Creativity innately is play because how else are you finding it? Like creativity by nature is not structured. So they were given a safe space where they were given not a cue to go exploring, but like the opportunity to like, well, if this doesn't feel that great, try, see what does. It's like trying on jeans. You have to try on 100
Yeah.
pairs of jeans to see which one is going to fit you properly. And even sometimes people who know me well know this about myself. Like once I find something I like, I will perpetually buy like 7 pairs of the same exact thing. And I'll wear them every day in a row to the point that one of my students a couple of years ago was like, Miss Emily, are you wearing the same pants you wore yesterday? And I was like, yes, but no, but yes, but no, but yes, but no.
Literally.
Like, yes, they're the same, but like, no, they're not the same pair I was wearing yesterday.
Right.
Because like hygiene is a thing, but like, um, and I think about that in the semblance of you're talking about, they're learning how to partner, which is hard. I I know sometimes people are like, partnering is easy, and I'm like, no, partnering is not easy. Partnering is easy when is when you
Mm.
feel comfortable in your own skin.
Yeah.
It becomes more readily accessible.
Yeah.
Partnering is made easier when you feel very comfortable in the knowledge of the person you're partnering with.
This.
For me, I don't do that much partnering anymore because I do choreography, but partnering for me, I feel more comfortable when I know that the person I'm working with is strong enough to not drop me.
Which is
But even
valid.
when they are strong enough to not drop me, like depending upon what we're working on, if you run, run, run and throw yourself at someone, you might find out that as strong as they are static, actually that strong when you come running at them. Uh, and so what I really hear is you saying, they felt safe enough and comfortable enough to explore and have playtime in a space that was conducive to creativity happening in real time with the freedom that if the thing you were specifically looking for didn't work, there was an open door for something else to work. That is a safe space.
It's the goal.
I mean, it is
That's
the
the
goal.
hope.
I think for most of us, I hope for most of us. I say that because I know there's people out there who like don't create safe spaces in the way that I personally feel like they should or they could. Um, but that's difference of personality, that's difference of life experience. Like I always talk about, I'm very big on consent, um, which is not something I necessarily grew up with. And to nobody's fault, it wasn't something that was discussed at that point in training. But now, I always share openly, like, because I have some health stuff that provided for some sensory things for quite a while. Like, I used to be a hugger, very much so, and now, like, I'm very sensitive to cats. And so
Yeah.
before somebody hugs me, I'll usually very quickly be like, "Do you have a cat?" And I'll be
Yeah.
like, "Air hug."
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, the love is still there.
Yeah.
Excuse me, but like, please don't get your cat dander on me because, like, then I can't breathe.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're big on consent, and I think that plays in to this as well. Also partnering,
100%.
like trusting who you're partnering. If I'm partnering with somebody at this point, absolutely that conversation happens ahead of time. Like, do you have a cat? If you do, you can't be my partner.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not because I don't think you're great or that
Important
you
part
wouldn't
of
be a
it.
wonderful partner to me, but because
I
I won't
have
be able to
to,
breathe if I partner.
yeah, which is a pretty important part of the
It's a pretty important part of
the
our
equation.
practice.
This is a really important part of it in order for them to then be able to show up fully in that space and that situation that I was in today. One of the girls isn't able to do the show, but she's still part of the process and all the things. And we had another student out. And so we talked to the beginning of class of like, oh, why don't today you step into her role? Like she's kind of doing an understudy type situation. But then when we got to the partnering, I also spoke to her and the partner of like, hey, the expectations can change today. It's okay. Like you don't know, I mean, they know each other, but like you don't know each other in this way,
Totally.
in the way that you have the relationship with your normal partner. And that's okay. And like you can of course see like the same. I think I'm also a very empathetic human. Can see when the feelings are coming up of like, oh, okay, I'm a bit nervous, and I just kept going over being like, hey, like fresh. It's a fresh canvas. Like what existed with this previous partner or your regular partner. It doesn't have to exist in the same way, and like I hope it landed, but like just that thing of how do you even at a younger age still be able to have that conversation because they're very capable, but I don't think it was always given to them the permission that they are allowed to have that conversation.
Absolutely. It makes me think of I run a training program here in New York, called Pipeline, with one of my dear friends and colleagues, Tracy Stanfield, and she choreographed for our end of semester showing, and there was a duet, and one of the dancers was not going to be able to be present for the second showing of it.
Mm.
She needed to catch a flight to Germany, and there are only so many flights you can get on, and so many, so many times, and so the duet was double cast. One person danced with each in each, and then one was split. And so it was very interesting, even just observationally there, to see it, in real time, how the dancer who was in both performances worked with each of those partners very differently based upon what their needs were, based upon what her needs were, based upon the way they were dancing the works together, which so interestingly was different, even though the one gal was dancing it both times because her duet partners were different. She herself differentiated in the way she was approaching the work, and it does, it makes a huge difference. And to be allowed to have that space and that creative freedom is so important. And also it allows you to know yourself. I keep coming back to like knowing yourself better, but I do think the way to be the best dancer you can be is to know yourself as a person first. Like, I can't be a great artist by separating myself from the equation. I can only be a great artist by putting myself even more into it. And the more comfortable I am with me, the more able I am to offer my art freely and generously because there's like a
Uh,
quiet
yeah.
ease about like I I either celebrate or accept these things about myself and therefore I can put them into my art in that way. And it was so interesting to see that moment happening just because I was like, every single dancer who's participating in this is being celebrated in their own individual way. And it was so interesting to see the dancer who was dancing both celebrate different parts of her work depending upon who she was dancing with.
Mm. Oh, I really love that. And it actually makes me think of a conversation I was having with another teacher at this competition that I was at recently with the kids that I'm working with this year. And in the structure that we were in, they have little performances before the awards thing. And at first they asked me to do it, and I was like, oh, yeah, like I'm always down to dance. But then equally, I don't want it to distract it all from number one, my like myself, my own brain as a teacher, but then equally for the kids to feel like it's becoming about me. But then I saw how it went for the first and looked at the schedule and was like, okay, it's easy for me to do this as an improv thing. It can be chill, it doesn't need to be super formal. And actually is a really nice opportunity to be like, hey, I need to practice what I preach and guys, I'm human too. Like this is just as important and I'm telling you to stay calm and be cool and that but it doesn't ever stop and it's not as easy as it is to just say it as it is
Oh,
to put it into
absolutely.
action.
It's so
And
easy to get into that like do as I say, not as I do mentality. And it's hard sometimes
right,
to be like, wait, no, like I really do have to practice what I preach and be the example that I want to set
right.
for these that I'm.
Well, and so I like ended up doing it the one day, but then basically there was a couple different, they had organized a couple different ones ahead of time, but then one of them fell through at the last minute. So one of the performers, her duet partner, wasn't able to perform with her last minute. So she said to me, "Hey, do you want to just like do an improv on stage? We've never met." And so we took 15 minutes before just to talk about things, like get in the space with each other, create a little something, but the rest was improvised and we did it and it was so lovely and we happened to like click really well as dancers, as movers, as people, I think. But afterwards we were talking of just this exact same sentiment of like how nice it is to just be in the space with someone else and it brings something else out of you, especially where we both had already performed in that setting that weekend and we're like, okay, like to give something fresh, it can be in the same weekend can be quite hard. But because we were with somebody new and in a completely different energy, but it's still us, it was such a nice moment to be like, wow, this is why we dance, like the power of other humans and to be able to connect and to share. I felt so lucky just to have that moment with her and be reminded of this thing.
Totally. Oh, and I love that you did it. Yay, you.
I was so nice. I was like, oh, it was so cool. And it really did work out so well in the way that I hadn't worked in this competition structure before to know how that looks. Like I've seen it in other US competition structures that I've worked in and kind of knew the gist in that scenario. But in this one, I was like, I don't want it. I just hope it doesn't. I hope it exists in a nice way, but not in a too over dramatic way or overcomplicated way. But it really did work out so nicely where it existed, but it was at the end of the day, I was able to already have all of my kids were finished. Everybody was good. They were sitting in the audience, like could switch hats instead of trying to multitask. So I felt very lucky just as a teacher and to be able to be a teacher and a dancer.
And a dancer literally simultaneously without it being a headbutt and allowing it to be a
Yeah,
this. Because
I
it
was
is
like, wow, the universe.
it's hard to put on those hats at the same time sometimes.
Definitely.
sometimes like they shouldn't be worn at the same
No,
time. So it's nice when they can commingle
right?
in a very respectful to self manner and also
Yeah.
respectful to everybody else involved manner.
Right?
Because I feel like often they don't. Like they'll commingle, but it like something ends up, what's the word I'm looking for? Like something ends up losing when they commingle
Exactly.
instead of something ending up being a gain for everybody.
Yeah. Which felt very, very grateful in that moment where I was like, "Ah, okay, it's what I wanted it to be. Um, yeah, this is why we dance.
This I mean,
Um,
is why we dance though, and like with a new not that it always has to be with a new person, but like with
oh,
a new person and having that same kind of just like I don't know, dance often offers the make it work energy also of the like you're here and I'm here and we love dance, like let's do something together and let's make it work.
yeah,
And then to perform the whatever you made work like 15 minutes, which
here
also
we
feels
go.
accurate.
Super accurate. Yeah, we were like, that's part of it. But I think, yeah, like it actually was a very like mm, it's been I don't know if I've ever performed that quick turnaround, like from a teaching thing into a performing role, like with that quick of a turnaround, but it was felt a lot easier to practice what you preach when it's that that close
It
together.
was
I was like,
almost better because you didn't have time to overthink or overanalyze.
right? We both were like, oh, maybe this is the key. You just have to
Yeah. Sometimes I feel like the kiss of death to the creative practice is having too much time
100%.
because as like a very type A individual, if you give me too much time as someone, I think part of the reason I'm a good teacher is because I have a very I don't like the phrase critical, but like hypersensitive eye
Yeah,
to my own work before anybody else's. But if
yeah,
you give me too much time to let it like fester, keywords here, because if you give me the right amount of time, it can marinate in season. But if you
yeah,
give me too
yeah,
much time, it's now festering.
yeah.
And I think that it almost sometimes is better when there's like just a little bit of a like, I'm on a time crunch and I don't have time to be overly critical of it
Yeah.
because the sensitivity and the critical are not the same. I can be sensitive to it without being like, oh, that's bad and that needs to change and this other thing was not a good choice and like we need to fix that over there. Um, it does actually make for a better experience sometimes for everyone.
Yeah, 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 definitely. I relate a lot to this. Uh, just enough time. Just enough time.
Like that sweet spot. It's giving very Goldilocks and the Three Bears, and like the porridge is too cold, the porridge is too hot, the porridge is just right. Like it's making me sound like the needy individual that I am, but I do think that, the porridge does sometimes need to be just right. And if it is too cold and it's like not enough time, then the product suffers. And if it's too
Yes.
much time and there's too much time to like get heady about it and like get critical and over analyze it and get OCD in your practice, then that's not really to the benefit of anyone either. Then you start to criticize things and people and choices. And at the end of the day, like, I know I stand really firmly that when I teach class, what I offer is observational feedback, not criticism. And I do think, though, sometimes there's a fine line when you're in practice of like, where does it stop being feedback and where does it start being criticism? And
Mm,
how is it different sometimes? And I think the differentiation is often in the way it's offered, not what is being offered, because there are only so many ways to get a dancer to fix a sickled foot, for example. But me telling you that your foot is sickled and then helping you reshape it is not trying to criticize the sickle, whereas yelling at a kid for it being sickled and not offering the assistance to reshape it is criticism
mm.
and like finding the happy balance.
It makes me think of the same sentiment we were speaking about earlier of rigor and care being
Yeah.
cohabitants in a space and how that empowers a dancer to be able to grow rather than feeling stifled by criticism and then just stuck in, okay, well, I did it wrong, and what do I do now? Like,
Right. Like
uh,
either you get stuck in it or it sits with you, you know? Like there are things people said to me as a teenage dancer that I still remember. And I don't think it was from a place, and I always want to be very clear, I do not believe that it was from a place of malice. Um, but it's that like cheesy meme that gets floated around social media of like words linger, or like people are always like sticks and stones can break your bones, but words will never hurt you. And I'm like, I would much prefer somebody throw a stick at my face than say something awful because that awful thing will replay itself in my psyche over and I know that's not every personality type. It's a very but oh my gosh, the hardest part of I think dance education for me is actually or not the hardest part, but one of the things I'm most aware of is being cautious in my word choice and in my
yeah,
tone because it's not even just what you say, it's how you're saying it. Like I live in a very I don't scream at dancers mentality, and that I can literally count on one hand how many times I have screamed at dancers. One of which actually, one of my student, God, he's such a wonderful, he's a, not even a young man anymore. He's a full grown man, dancing for a very well known company in Chicago, and he's incredibly talented. And he was the first dancer I ever yelled at. And I know I have permission to tell this story. I'm not going to tell the whole story because I don't want him to be fully identifiable. But he showed up to a rehearsal that involved partnering. It was for a pas de deux, and he was not prepared for something and almost dropped a girl on her head. And I yelled at him. And
yeah,
that was the first time I ever yelled at a dancer. But it wasn't because I was yelling at him for the sake of yelling or like the critique was yelled at. I yelled at him because I was like, how dare you show up unprepared when somebody's health and safety is at stake? So, like, it takes a lot to get me to yell at someone. Something like that, for example, would be one of the few reasons why I would yell at
yeah, yeah.
someone. But I see people who yell at dancers, and as someone who is more of a shut down when I get yelled at type of gal, um, I don't see it as a win.
No,
There is always a better way. And if you're dealing with a dancer who does thrive on yelling, then you know that about that one dancer.
yeah, yeah,
In general, in classroom spaces where it's not just a solo private, where you know that a dancer does respond well to that, I just don't think it's ever necessary. And I think more dancers than not, I speak to them like they're people because they are. And it also, I don't know, and maybe there would be respectful disagreement of this from colleagues of mine or colleagues anywhere, but I would much prefer a student in my classroom feel like they're being respected as a person. And then if they don't take the note and I have to give it a second time, like, so be it.
yeah,
But in general, I find that having a calm, collected dialogue with someone gets me a faster result than
yeah.
I feel like saying being cruel is a harsh phrase for it, but like being abrasive.
Mm.
None of my young dancers have ever responded well to being spoken to abrasively.
Mm.
And maybe that's a generational thing because I watched some of my mentors get spoken to very abrasively, but I looked at it and I thought, well, what is the necessity of that?
Yeah,
Why is that the approach that gets taken? I always questioned it. I was like, I don't
yeah,
know how this is more effective than being respectful that they're a person you're having a conversation with.
yeah, yeah.
Same way you ask, I always use this as the analogy of like, if I were going to ask someone for a favor, how would I ask them? And would I respond well to somebody screaming it at me? Like, you do my laundry. And like, no, absolutely not.
I will
Versus
not
like,
do.
can you,
Yeah,
the wash is going to finish. Can you throw my stuff in the dryer? Would you mind? I'd really appreciate it.
yeah,
Like, sure, I got you. all good. Throw the word please in there, and I've definitely got you.
Right?
But yell at me, and mm,
Yeah, just kindness goes a long way. And ultimately, like as you were speaking, the thing that was just going around in my head is like, no matter what space, whether it's dance, school, a favor, another sport, like we all are human, no matter what. So even if you're wanting to be s- like the thing that I think I started to play around with in my head was, okay, in a space where you're trying to get a certain like PR time running something. Even then, you're still a human at the end of the day. Like,
no,
even if it is that you did it or you didn't, the person waking up that morning is still gonna be feeling all the things. Like,
exactly, exactly, and just remembering that in classroom spaces, and yeah, I mean, this could be a much longer tangent on this specific topic, but I just think, especially with the state of the world the way it is, and like respect lacking in so many different places, in so many different ways, people seemingly behaving in callous manners frequently. My classroom space is not the space to be lacking it in. Everyone's a person. Like I do, I always think of the like, you never know who's having a bad day sentiment. So I try to offer grace. I mean, if someone shows you a consistent pattern
yeah,
of lacking, being respectful, then that's a different situation. But it's not my job to berate students in a classroom. It's my job to teach them. By definition, as an educator, like my job is to teach. It's not to give class. It's not to take my own class. It's to show up informed and share that information. The way I share it matters just as much as what I've decided to share on any given day. How I am going to share it matters. That's why I said, like, circling all the way back, if I'm for you, I'm usually like either really for you or really not for you, because I am a chatty Cathy by nature, but I speak during my class because number one, it's not a choreography class, it's a dance class, and part of that is involving understanding of how we're doing what we're doing and understanding biomechanics, for lack of a wider conversation about that. Like, proper technique is proper technique, and while some elements of it are objective, like first position is objective, but on everybody's individual body it is subjective, and it
mm,
is, I think, in my best interest as a teacher and also in the best interest of the dancer to go looking for what is going to work for each individual person in my classroom space. If you're not interested in that, or the understanding of that, or the why of why we're working in this way, then I'm not for you. And I'm okay with that. I would much prefer to have dancers in the space with me who are interested in that. I want to understand how to maximize efficiency and effectivity in my body. Okay,
mm,
cool. Let's do that. Let's look at how you're standing. Let's look at your structure. Let's look at what your rotation accommodates for. Let's look at if you're knock kneed. Let's look at if you're bow legged. Let's look at if you're hyperextended. Let's look at if my scapulas project backwards. Let's look at what the structure of your upper back is. All of it. And if you're interested in that, come on in. The water's warm. Like, we will
yeah,
geek out together over all of those things to make sure that by the time you get to choreography, which of course I teach a dance class, we are dancing in my classroom, but that by the time we get there and I ask you for it to be visceral and not just structural, you don't have to think about the structural anymore, because that was the purpose of warm up.
yeah,
Now you can think about why, how, what is your thought train, what is your story, what is your theme, what is your intent, what is it you're trying to evoke, how do you feel about it, is that going to project itself through the movement as the vehicle for that thought and feeling, are you actually making art, or are you doing steps? And if
mm,
you do this out, If you're doing steps said with love, I'm not super interested. I said it out loud. I'm just
Yeah.
not because anybody can be taught to do steps.
Yeah.
I could teach anyone how to do a step. I
Yeah.
cannot teach everyone to be an artist. I
No.
can open the door and I can open the mind and I can hopefully open your spirit in a way where you feel safe to allow yourself into your artistry. That is the goal.
Yeah. That is the goal, and it goes right back to the importance of the human and the training coexisting and
Coexisting, cohabitating,
cohabitating,
being married of sorts.
working.
Yeah.
Yes. Mm. I love it. I love it. I love it. I feel it so much in your spaces and feel empowered as a human and then as an artist and as an educator. Like, I think I just feel very grateful for spaces like yours. So I
Thank
feel so lucky to to have been privileged to be in your spaces. And
you.
as
Throw
we
us together as you were
right,
randomly in New York for like a few days.
my favorite way, favorite way to be like, wow, New York, here we are. But no, it's so fun. So fun. As we are chatting and stuff, I think we should probably head into a question from the previous guest.
Yeah, let's
Uh,
do it.
and they asked, how has or is movement showing up for you? Is it something, ooh, is it some cat cows in the morning to feel your body? Is it signing up for class that pushes you mentally and physically for growth? Or is it breath work at night to recenter you?
That's a very loaded question.
Yeah. It's a big question. And
How is movement showing up for me? I I hate for this to sound like cliche, but I think movement shows up for me in most of what I do outside of my desk work. And even in my desk work, I'm sitting on a yoga ball chair to keep me so that I'm not just like static as I'm sitting. As someone with perpetual ants in my pants, I walk everywhere. I wake up in the morning and I do my roll down and roll up and stretch my hamstrings. And I am very privileged that I find myself in a dance studio usually 6 or 7 days a week. And not just any dance studio, but like these dance studios here in New York that you walk into and you like the history of them and the hard work in them and the energy that's just in those spaces existing. And I think that is honestly how movement shows up for me because I'm showing up for movement, but it's showing up in return.
Hmm.
And I think that's like with anything, step one of my dear mentors always says step one is showing up. And I respectfully agree to disagree with that. I think step one is making the choice to show up. And then step two is the actualization of that. And I thought about that because I teach on Sunday mornings at 9 a.m. at Broadway Dance Center. And I had someone years ago, actually, my original slot, my first slot that was mine was Thursdays at 9 a.m. And I had somebody who I really looked up to actually tell me that nobody was going to come for class at 9 a.m. And as a young teacher, I was a little disheartened, but at the same time, I was like, no, I'm going to show up. Like, I'm going to show up, and people will show up eventually. It might take some time, but like, they will. And people did start showing up. And so I think in my making the active choice to show up for movement and then actually following through on that choice and doing so and showing up for the movement, that movement is then able to show up for me in whatever
Hmm.
format it looks like on any given day. Some days it is me being able to take class for myself. Some days it's me teaching class. Some days it's me having where I show up a few minutes early and the studio is magically gifted to me truly by the universe for like a little short amount of time to just do my work in a studio space instead of at home or having to rent a space. But since I kind of believe that all things are movement to an extent, I think movement shows up for me very consistently.
Mm.
And I don't know if I'm answering that question that well, but I think movement is constant in my existence. And I actively seek it out sometimes, and sometimes it finds me, but it always kind of meets in the middle in that it exists.
I 100% like hands up support this
Thank
support
you.
what you're speaking about because even that when the guest before you proposed this question, I was like, such a good point. And I think it's kind of what I want to get at with the opener question, but in a it was nice to have another brain ask that question
Right.
because I think it for me the question always came from a two-sided it's a two-sided thing. And it can show up for us because we're showing up for it, but then equally we can show up for it because it shows up for us and how lucky we are to have something like to have movement and to have access to movement and love for movement. So thank you for sharing your
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, former guest who asked that question.
yeah.
Oh, I think that answer is what you were hoping for. I'd be curious to know if you were expecting that type of a ramble, but I do. And I think, just to like finalize my thoughts on it, because I'm very open about my health journey and I'm, open about it here. But there was a time about 6 years ago at this point, at the height of the pandemic where I was not really able to move. I was too sick. And
Mhm.
so showing up on any given day for movement sometimes was just literally going from my bed to like my kitchen
Yeah.
or going from my bed to my bathroom. And then I was so just like not well enough to move beyond that. And then movement, once I got, thankfully, knock on wood, was starting to feel a little bit better, was able to move a little bit more. And like, so I think in that capacity as well, movement was showing up for me in the ways that it could. And I think that's always important to keep in mind is that movement shows up as it's able.
Hmm.
Or like I was showing up as I was able, but it wasn't the same as it had been even a month prior at that point. And where
Yeah.
it shows up for me now, back in a much healthier existence, it's able to show up for me very consistently and not taken for granted anymore. Whereas a former version of myself was like, I never would have thought, like, oh, there will be a day where I am struggling to get from my bed to my bathroom. Whereas now I no longer have that struggle, but I remember it. And
Yeah.
so I'm more appreciative that it shows up as willingly as it does. But I think even in that hard time, like it was still trying to show up, which is, I think, very dancer
Yeah. Yeah.
fantasy.
Yeah.
It was like I'm trying so hard to show up. But I had to be more acutely aware of it.
Definitely. It makes me think actually about what you were speaking about a few minutes ago around the difference between like the first step being the intention and then the second step being the action of like and also that as someone offering class or someone offering something that there might be people who want to be in your space or resonate with you and want to be there but it doesn't always work out and it's not always as simple as our brains like to make it and just to remind ourselves of that of the effort, the journey, the complexity, the the care, all of the things.
No, and
It's
it's
not
true all
finding
of
all
the
the words, but
things because, teaching open classes, sometimes dancers will be like, I'll see you next week, and then they don't make it, and then, they're apologizing. And I was like this too. I was
yeah,
absolutely, I'm so sorry I didn't make it. And my perspective on it now is like, you'll make it when you're able to make it, and you're always welcome, and we're so happy to have you when it works, and when it doesn't work, we understand.
Yeah. Yeah.
Life sometimes gets in the way, or like as I mentioned, I teach one of my classes on Sundays, and we had two snowstorms on Sundays. One of them, Broadway Dance Center closed for, which I was grateful for, because although I live within walking distance to the studio, it didn't feel safe. But many
Yeah.
of my students don't. And
Mm.
I was grateful that they closed and made the decision for everyone to stay safe. And then the second one, it was safe for me to get to the studio, but I went out of my way when I said I was teaching to be like, but if it doesn't feel safe for you to get to the studio, don't come. Like,
Yeah.
please don't come. Do not put yourself in harm's way, or put yourself in a situation with, we know the subways in New York City can be a little bit scandalous on their best day, and on a snow day can be just absolutely buck wild. I was like, if, when my class is over at 10:30, if you fear you're going to have trouble getting home or whatever, whatever, also please don't come, and know that we love you and will miss you, but also your safety is more important. So the intention to come might be there, but then reality sometimes jumps in and says, no, you have something else you need to do, or somewhere else you need to be, or whatever it is. Or sometimes you just wake
Yeah.
up tired.
This is
And,
true, and
and
also an important side of it.
yeah, and movement respectfully has not chosen you that day.
Yeah. It's for later.
Like save it for
Yeah.
tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Definitely. Ugh, oh, so much good stuff. So much good stuff. Thank you so much for all of your energy and for sharing it and being, yeah, so open and curious and happy to chat. So,
I mean, ditto for all of the things. Right back at you. Thank you for having me. This was so much fun. We love time zones.
right. Listeners, stay tuned for the next episodes and next seasons coming soon. We have lots of fun things coming your way. But if you have any other reflections or questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments below. Emily and I would love to hear what resonated with you all, and see you all soon. Thank you for listening to this episode of Conversations for the Moving Self. Today, we are sharing the final episode for season 2, and it has been such a pleasure to keep sharing all these episodes with you. I'm so grateful to all of the guests for sharing so generously, so curiously exploring their practices alongside myself, and just continuing to open up the doors to conversations that I find myself having with so many incredible practitioners from all around the world. That being said, as we move into season 3, I would really, really appreciate if you could hit that follow button on social media as well as on your major streaming platform. Then you'll stay up to date on all the upcoming episodes, and it also allows us to gain more support for the podcast and hopefully bring you better and better episodes each season. Thank you so much for staying with us, and biggest love from Conversations for the Moving Self.